Here we are again visiting Britain and its social history over the past 40 or 50 years. Only this time we've got a viewer's request. He has asked us to rewind back to another decade, and he has chosen the 1980s. So, Simon Blackburn, thank you. And this is my look back at our British social history of looking at those affordable toys that we got in the early 1980s. I'll do some posh ones and some cheapo brands, and hopefully many of you will remember. Christmas dinner to begin with. Christmas dinner was still that traditional meal, but with some modern changes. Frozen turkeys that took a week to defrost, and more frozen vegetables being used. We began honey glazing our carrots, our parsnips and our ham joints. Starters such as vol au vent and cheeses were on the table. Thank you, Delia Smith. We were drinking Italian wines such as Piattor and mulled wines. The 1980s had just begun. Central television had just started in the Midlands, and it seemed to us like 1980 was the sci-fi and futuristic computer age world. It had all begun. Jobs were getting more scarce, and families, apart from stock exchange yuppies, were having to tighten their belts, with the UK in recession and high unemployment. But Christmas was still very much a family thing, and for most, finding the money to make that day special. So let's get on with it, the gifts and toys that we got in the 1980s. Many people can remember this driving them absolutely mad. It was the Rubik's Cube. The toy or puzzle had been around since 1974, invented by Enro Rubik, but it was catapulted into the market after a toy fair in New York in 1980. Over 100 million was sold, and people were clicking and clicking all Christmas Day until thump. That's the sound of the cube flying through the room and hitting the wall. They were quite pricey to begin with, well, the original ones, but down the market a bloke was selling mock cubes for £1. And if you had one of these, then you were even more frustrated because the damn things would stick and you'd have to pop a little bit of washing up liquid into the cube to get it to move. But did you crack the cube? Or did you just peel off the stickers and swap them all over? But the cavalry had arrived, as late 1981, Patrick Bossert sold us the book, You Can Do the Cube. We had the cube, we had the barrel and other shapes, but they all played the same and was equally as frustrating. It's 1982 and the news is on, and we're watching shoppers losing their heads and fighting over this rather ugly doll, the Cabbage Patch Kid toy. All the dolls looked individual. An American campaign stated that they all looked different and one could find a doll that looked like you. Heaven forbid. It reminds me of one of those fab jumble sales we had back in the 80s, where it was a mission to get there early and fight for your bargain. Two women fighting over a dress that no one dared to get involved. This was happening with these dolls. Kids were crying for these dolls. Mothers were rioting, and some children even went to counselling with mental health problems. Have you seen these dolls? They never looked great, did they? There was a mechanical version of these Cabbage Patch dolls that chewed in order to give it some more reality. That caused a problem when the mechanism was too strong, in fact strong enough to break plastic and unfortunately fingers. Snack time dolls they were called. They chewed their own hair. No serious injuries were ever reported, but the model was banned and recalled. Every Cabbage Patch doll had its unique name and a birth certificate. The compact disc was invented in 1980 by Philips and Sony in collaboration. It was a versatile disc that could hold 72 minutes of music with lossless reproduction. They came onto the market in 1982, and like any new gadget, being expensive, they took a while to catch on. Back in the 80s, people couldn't record on one, so the tape was still the best buy, as you could make your own music recording from the radio. The popularity grew with the Sony Discman, a personal disc player just like the Walkman cassette player, costing £200 upon launch, but many people couldn't afford one. It didn't take long for cheaper models to come along, such as Seisho or Alba, which brought the price down for us less well-off kids. We could get one, and we were content. The batteries never lasted long, but they did sound great. The Glowworm. The Glowworm toy, introduced in 1982, was a plush toy that acted as a nightlight. Press something on its belly, and it would glow. His head was made of vinyl, so obviously that's where the glow came through, and it was battery operated. This is still available today by Hasbro. I couldn't find an original one from back then, but it came with batteries, and like many battery toys back in those days, you had to wait before we could afford new batteries. The Fisher-Price cassette recorder. The original one was made in 1982, and it has to be said it wasn't a great eye-catching colour for kids. It was dull beige. Battery operated only, it did all the functions from a portable cassette recorder. It was robust and it could be dropped numerous times and survived. It was a great toy. As a matter of fact, I bought one from a car boot sale a few years back. The original price was £14, slightly higher than the conventional players. They also introduced a Fisher-Price reel record player in 1983. My mother bought me a second-hand cassette player for £5, and I loved it just the same. It was a Tesco home brand called Sugar. Has anybody still got one of these? Mine didn't last long at all. Transformers, robots in disguise. They were all over TV adverts, mainly during the kids' programmes. This was an era from when you left school and up until the news started. We had those hours on our main channels dedicated to kids' programmes, such as Grange Hill, Blue Peter, Rent-A-Ghost, all that. Transformers were out in 1984 and got into the UK the following year. You had a car or a truck that suddenly became a robot just by clicking and turning a few things. Well, it sounds easy. They were a Japanese idea, and they collaborated with Hasbro, and they really did take on. Later, TV movies and a cartoon series was made, and the products just grew and grew. I never had one, but I'm sure they were loads of fun for the kids. There were many cheaper versions on the market. I seem to remember local kids getting Converterbot and Tobot, made in China or Korea. There was also a hardback annual of Transformers produced in the 1980s, which was very popular. We were getting more clever in the 1980s, well, according to the Family Game launched in 1981. Trivial Pursuit came onto the market, but initially it was not a great success. But as the decade progressed, it was a game that everyone had heard of and many had played. Making up a pie by answering different questions on different subjects was the aim of the game, not a real pie. Did we find it exciting? Or was it cheaper just to watch the programme Ask the Family, presented by Robert Robinson, asking questions that needed a university degree to answer? Or was I just thick? The concept of the programme was exactly the same as the game, but without the pie. Walkie-talkies for kids, mainly made of plastic. They become more popular in this decade owing to more reliable receivers. Well, sort of. Fisher-Price again did the better models, but there were much cheaper brands of this toy. You needed 2 PP9 batteries and away you went. Some had Morse code alphabet printed on the front of them, and you could send messages by pressing one little button that made a really annoying bleep that no one really used. They crackled and buzzed and always lost signal, even the dear ones. I can remember my cheap model having to be so close enough to hear the other person speaking live, I could physically hear them from the mouth before picking up the voice on the radio. They were fun, though not great technically. Kids were talking what CB language they could remember through citizen band radios, very popular in the day. Home sets used to interfere with your telly. All that jargon, 10-4 for a copy, give me a 9 on that, watch your handle. It was lorry drivers chatting up housewives. All very Mills and Boon. The age of personal music listening was upon us. I should have mentioned this before the Discman really, but we're going to talk about the Walkman. The Walkman was getting off the ground. People roller skating and getting lost in sound. Cliff Richard roller skating being wired for sound. Sony was the gift for the more affluent family. But many of us got the brands that we couldn't probably pronounce. Well, it wasn't quite that bad, but mine had got no rewind on it. So what you'd have to do, you'd have to fast forward your tape on the one side, turn it over, and when you turned it over, it had been rewound on the other side. If you've ever owned one of those cheap machines, then you'll understand what I'm saying. Companies such as Bush, Seisho, Crown, Alba, they had the cheaper models that we could all get, and they had those headphones with the orange spongy head covers on them. Oh, I don't know how to explain them, but there's a picture anyway. They lasted well, and to be honest, many are being sold second-hand online today. Only second-hand in our day is now known as vintage. Just a quick mention, even though Diecast toys have been around for years, in the 1980s we saw them remain popular. Matchbox and Corgi were still competing, but Corgi won the most popular with the Ford Escort Mark III, and in 1982 they released the police car version. Incidentally, Corgi's best-selling car ever was the James Bond Aston Martin DB5. It was introduced in 1965 and sold 5 million units during its 13-year span. They make numerous models today of more or less everything. Did you ever want that pop or cassette album for Christmas from a famous band? Although the CD had been introduced, many of us were still getting vinyl cassettes and vinyl albums. We just loved the artwork. Well, thanks to Woolworths selling music media by companies such as Chevron and Hallmark, parents thought we wouldn't mind getting one of these tapes or 12-inch albums by standing singers. For example, a tribute to ABBA or a salute to ELO. They never really sounded like the original band, did they? They were cheap, and the quality of the tape was okay for recording over. There were loads of releases from classical rock to pop music, and they all sold quite well. Does anyone remember them? The first real album I got for Christmas was in 1981. It was Dare by the Human League. That was because my sister liked the band, so she recorded it on tape before I even got the record. Anyway, back to Chevron. Chevron tapes were similar to those Top of the Pops albums that we got in the 70s, but they had started to decline. Mind you, singers like Elton John, Tina Charles and Trevor Horn added their voices to these records, and in 1971 a Top of the Pops album did actually reach #1 in the charts. Now they have become a cult phenomenon, and they were released on CD. And just for another tidbit, Woolworths had previously done low-cost music with Embassy Records with singles, using unknown singers to cover hits that were actually still in the charts in the 1960s, obviously for a cheaper price. But we love Woolies though, didn't we? We were so grateful for anything that we got and never expected more than our parents could afford. Those Christmas stockings we knew were going to be crammed with chocolates and sweets, no matter what the brand or value. We were always excited as we made our own selections back then. Nuts, boiled sweets, chocolate flavour mice and a few quality streets or roses. They were enough, and we made them last, well, as long as we didn't waste our dinners. A special treat inside would always be a Yorkie bar or a Cabana or the odd chocolate liqueur. Electronic toys were beginning to grow, but many were expensive, so for the early 80s not too many of us could afford them. Commodore 64 was a massive present, with a massive 64 kilobyte memory, home computer, or even an Atari 600 or a Nintendo. If we knew a kid at school who had one of these, they were certain to have friends visiting their house. The games were on cassettes for home computers, and it would take a good while for the game to load while the tape played out. The Commodore 64 was in colour, and we thought the graphics were amazing. Released in 1983, this setup would have knocked you back £399. That was twice the price of the ZX Spectrum at the time. The Atari toy, everyone wanted one. It had a choice of many games that just loaded by plugging in a different cartridge, and it kept its popularity for years. From Space Invaders and Pac-Man to Super Mario, fun for kids that played with family and friends. In 1980, the console without games was priced at £150, but I do believe you did get a free game when you bought one. My Little Pony was launched in 1982 by Hasbro, a horse-like doll that had a mane and a tail that kids could brush and style. It followed the original My Pretty Pony toy in 1981, but was different because it had different colour models. A Little Pony took off, later had film releases, and the franchise went on for years. Well, I was about to finish, but our friend Simon, you know, the guy that asked for this request, has sent me a message and has given me some ideas of what he liked to do in the 1980s when it comes to kids' toys. The first one is the Dukes of Hazzard Barnbuster set. Albeit it was made in the 70s, Simon, I'm sure it was still selling well into the 80s. It was taken from the American TV production, The Dukes of Hazzard, obviously. And we all remember that great car, the General. That car was also released as a toy by Corgi in the 1980s. My Dog Has Fleas. Released ready for Christmas in 1980, kids would see a new game, but it was very similar to Buckaroo. This time you had to put fleas on a dog until the poor thing could cope no longer and it jumped and shook all the things off. I must add, no real dogs were used in the making of this toy. Few animal lovers out there, and definitely no real fleas. He also had for Christmas in 1980 a game called I Want to Bite Your Finger. This was a board game with counters and with the object of avoiding putting your finger in the vampire's mouth, thus not getting bit, which left a red mark on your digit. He did also mention, albeit it's 70s, but everybody's going to remember this toy in the 1980s very fondly. It was that tree, I think it was called the tree house, that went up and down. Very, very green. Simon, thank you so much for adding those. I'm sure that's going to bring a lot of fun memories back for people. Well, I hope I've jogged a few memories of what kids loved or loathed back in the 80s. And once again, I'm sorry for any errors or typos. People know I'm dyslexic by now. And you've all been very kind with your comments. Thank you. I've got more social history videos on my channel, normally about Britain in the 70s or the 80s, if you care to take a look. Moreover, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.